Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and today I'm reviewing Founders of Teotihuacan from Board and Dice Games. And this has nothing to do with the original Teotihuacan, past the sharing of the theme, publisher, all of that. This instead is a slightly falling into that thinky filler category of a game that does play in a relatively short time frame, maybe 40 to 60 minutes, and giving you a decently thinky experience while also having, slightly lighter mechanics at the same time. That mix of genres, so to speak, of polyominoes, of action placement and all that, but giving you a fun little puzzle at the same time, although Feast for Odin also has polyominoes, and that's far from a light game. But in any case, how does the game play? The game basically is going to go over a variable number of rounds depending on the player count, and a variable number of actions depending on the player count, in which you are ultimately trying to gather a whole bunch of stuff from this center display in order to put them on your personal board over here in order to score as efficiently as possible. That's primarily what's going on. Now, that scoring is going to happen through both in-game effects as you do different actions, as well as through the building of your pyramid. Your pyramid that doesn't come with like nice little 3D pyramid tiles. Rather, your pyramid is going to be taking these tiles over here and slowly layering them across the board until you get to the next level, and then going around and around and around again until you get to the next level, until eventually you have your center pyramid. So you have 9, then 4, then 1. That's going to be the pyramid you are slowly constructing, although likely using different colors and not just the ones you have over here. Those pyramids are important because they will score based on the temples you have on the board in the various quadrants of the board as you play. So the whole game you're playing, you're trying to be mindful of resources, which you'll need to do a bunch of things. You're trying to be mindful of a variety of bonuses, so you can score a bunch of other bonus points as you play. You're trying to be mindful of getting as many temples as possible onto the board, because you're scoring at the end of the game, which can be a huge chunk of your points, is usually a combination of multiplying your pyramids and their heights by the various temples you have. So you want a lot of pyramids, you also want a lot of temples. And so you're trying to balance all these things, the resources, the points, the temples, the pyramids, the other scoring actions, in order to score as many points as possible across, well, variable number of rounds. 2-player game will have 4 rounds. It's all listed over here. 3 versus 2 or 4 players, different rounds. You'll have your eclipse token and your sun token moving along as you go through the game. The turn structure basically involves taking discs and putting them on these action spaces to take one of 6 different actions. There are 3 build actions up here and the 3 influence actions down here. So there's a total of 6 different actions, and where you place one of your discs determines which actions you have. So if I place a disc over here, I can build or I can take this influence action. If I go over here, same thing, the 2 different quadrants as I go. But additionally, the first player to place on each of these bonus discs, which will be shuffled up every single round, you'll get an additional bonus. So as you play, you're trying to be mindful of not just what you want, but also which bonuses are still available. Which additional extra things can you get as you're trying to pursue all these goals. And then to throw another wrench into the mix, you also have the fact that as you place tiles, you can place multiple discs at once in order to take a single stronger action in the game. So I can go ahead and put both of these over here in order to take a stronger action. So you additionally have this trade-off of not just the action you take, not just where you go, not just the bonuses, but do you want to potentially give up an action in order to take a stronger action in the game, as the height of the discs, the number of discs in a stack, determine the strength of the action. And to be clear, that's not the number of discs you placed. Rather, whenever you have a disc on the board, let's say a player has gone over here already, they've currently gone there and they've taken an action. If I take one of my discs and put it on top, that is a 3 strength action. You always count the bonus disc, you count the other discs that are already there, and you count your own disc there, and that will give you the strength of the action, a strength which caps out at 4, because once a player places a 4th disc, again counting the bonus disc, so 3 player discs, 1 bonus disc, that represents the maximum height of the stack, and after that no one else can go there. And so there's this constant struggle of taking actions, of locking others out of actions, of gathering bonuses, of which actions you want to take, as you juggle all that in order to, well, build the most efficient structure and point scoring mechanism. As far as these 6 actions in the game, let's go through them one at a time, and then we'll cover any scoring and other things like that. But starting off over here, when you take a build action over here, you're going to gather one of these tiles, looking at the size of the tile and corresponding to the strength of the action. So if I want this 4 one over here, since there's 4 spots or 4 squares to this, that would require a strength 4 action. The player, let's say I had gone over here as a strength 3 action, I could take a 3 or lower. I'm going to gather this one over here. I'm going to put it somewhere on my board. It specifically has to be in the area where my architect is. The architect's going to be slowly moving around the board after each action. But right now I can build in these 2 quadrants. I'm going to build it over here, partially covering those, which is relevant in a second, and then I will gather the specific resource matching the terrain type and put it in all orthogonal squares around that tile. So when you build these buildings over here, they won't score you points, but they will give you resources which are essential, and they are also a factor in covering up all these little markers here, which are helpful because every time you cover up a full section, if later in the game I do cover this one up over here, I will immediately take that yellow spot over here, getting 4 points. So as you cover up these sections, you will get additional points for these little masks over here until those run out. So that's what we have over here. That is the core build action with these. They're going to generate resources and cover spots on your board. Then we move to the temples. When you take a temple build, you're going to gather one of these temples. You're going to pay the resources shown over there, and potentially paying extra resources if your strength is not high enough. If you take a strength 2 action and want to build this strength 5 temple, you'll have to pay an extra 3 stone in addition to the first 2 resources shown here. That last resource is paid for each missing strength of the action. You'll gather the thing. Again, your architects moved by now. You'll put them on the board, and you'll have to pay the resources shown from your board. So you're going to have to make sure you have the resources you need in order to actually be able to build these. You'll put it down, and you'll go ahead and again potentially cover spots over there. You will not generate resources, but you will gather one of these tiles matching the type of temple you built. So in this case, I can take either this tile or this tile, which will potentially give me other buildings. They'll potentially let me convert resources to points. They'll give me points for having other things. Whole bunch of things going on here, mostly a combination of points and or giving you more buildings, temples, whatever. So in this case over here, I can gather this one, and then later I'll have the opportunity to cash that in. Let's take this for right now. We'll worry about it later. I'm going to grab that, and we'll explain that shortly. Then we go to the pyramid action over here. Pyramids are always strength 4 because, again, they're a size 4 thing over here. And again, any shortage in strength is paid for by gold. Gold is also wild in the sense that you can always trade 2 gold for any 1 resource. We're going to go over here. We're going to, again, put down a disc, take an action. It's a strength 2 action, so we'll get an extra build action because that's the bonus. We can take a build action from any of these regions over here. And then over here, we're going to take a strength 2 action, which means I'd have to pay 2 gold plus 2 more for the shortfall, plus a wood, so 4 gold and a wood, and build one of these temples over here, which will go somewhere on my center grid, giving me the bonus zone. And these boards, by the way, have a symmetric side for all players, as well as an asymmetric side if you want to play with that instead. I'll go over here. That'll give me another temple. I'll take it from the supply this time. Whenever you take bonus actions, it comes from the general supply instead of the limited buildings on the board. And I'll put it out. Again, that gives me all these little cascading different benefits or effects. And then from there, we're going to start moving to the influence actions. You'll also get 2 points, by the way. From there, we'll start going to the influence actions because there are 3 different influence actions. Same system, you're placing them in the same spot, so I can go over here. That'll be a strength 4 influence action. Strength is not usually as much of a factor for the influence. You're often trying to balance getting the influence actions in at lower strengths and then the higher strengths for the other actions. But when you go over here, you can either you can place 2 size 1 buildings from the gray or the brown, and again building resources as required. Or alternatively, you can place 1 resource next to each building you have on the board. That's great once you start having more buildings. Not as great for your very first move of the game, but as you have 5-6 buildings on the board, getting a restock, a replenish can be very helpful. When you go over here, you get to score any one of the tiles you have. So in this case, I can go ahead. I'll score 5 points, and I'll take a gray or brown. I'll take a gray, I'll build it over this resource, and I'll go ahead and get rid of that resource. Whenever you build over another resource, you lose it, but I'll also put out a resource here, and if I wanted to, I can replace any of those. You can't have 2 resources on a spot, but you could replace whenever you build where a resource exists, so I'll replace that one over there so I have a little more gray on the board, a little more flexibility, and also, because I've covered that up, I'll go ahead and grab this and move myself 4 points on that track. So a whole bunch of small things happening there. That's going to be cashing this in. We'll put this off to the side. And then over here, lastly, when you go here, you have the opportunity to move your disc 1 up to get the points shown wherever you moved, and to swap one of your tiles in for another one in case you got one that wasn't good or situations have changed or whatever it is. And this is 4 times throughout the course of the game. You will have the opportunity to move up the track, getting 2, 4, 6, then 8 points, while also swapping in tiles for better tiles that work better for your strategy. And those are the 6 actions of the game. The reason you're doing all this is, like I said already, you're juggling your resources, you're juggling balancing your actions, you're trying to be mindful of the various bonus actions, which will give you anything from resources to points to extra build actions to extra influence actions to treating the strength of the disc as 1 higher. So over here you get a point, and you can consider a 2 strength action as a 3 strength action. So there's all these little modifications of the bonuses. You'll shuffle up every round. Then you go to the end of the round where all players will lose a disc and you'll move 1 down. So across the course of the game, you are losing the discs as you go. And again, that's all variable based on the number of players, but you will lose a disc every single round. And then you go into the next round, rinse and repeat until the game ends. The primary way of scoring points in this game is going to be a fewfold. First of all, you have a lot of these tiles here. These are going to give you points. The green ones often give you point conversions, so you're going to be trading in resources for points. Gives you a lot of points, but you have to have a lot of resources to do so. The blue ones over here are going to often reward you for having certain things already. If you have these 2 yellow buildings, you'll get 10 points, so it's pretty easy. if you have them, but if you don't have them, it's nothing. The red ones often give you points for having stuff, but also will give you straight up points as well as other tiles or access to getting other tiles, and these are all giving you different points that you'll get over here. You'll have a variety of points you get from the bonus actions. You'll get points from moving up this track over here. You'll get points from these masks as you cover them up and slowly put up more things, and then the vast majority of your points, or at least the vast majority of our points in the games we've played, are coming from the multiplication of the temples by the number of pyramids and the height of the pyramids you have. Every single pyramid, when you build it, gives you 2 points, but additionally, every pyramid on the ground level is going to give you 2 points for every temple in that quadrant. What does that mean? So let's go ahead and let's just throw a few sample things out over here, and let's go like this. Okay, this ought to do it. That's good enough over here. This temple over here, let's put another temple down over here. Okay, this is how we would score these quadrants if this were the situation right now. This temple is going to score you for this quadrant. This temple is in this quadrant. It's going to score for this quadrant. There's 1, 2, 3. So we have 1 temple times 3 buildings times 2 points per building because of the level of the temple. That's going to be 6 points for this temple multiplied by these buildings. Now this temple is also in that quadrant, so that's going to be another 6 points because this scores for all of these. Where it gets interesting is this temple is also going to score for this quadrant, this section over here, because it's in both. But this time round, this temple crosses into this one, but the other ones do not. So you'll have 2 points coming from this side. So once again, 6 points for this, 6 points for this, and then 2 points for this, for a total of 14 points for the combination of temples and pyramids you have over here. If we had onto the second level over here, if we had gotten another one over here, this would score 3 points per temple in this quadrant. So this over here, because it's at the higher level, and that's going to be true for level 3 as well. Level 3 is also 3 points, but level 3 will score for every single quadrant. So this temple over here, this pyramid over here is going to score 3 points for each of these for another further 9 points. So if this were the situation on the board right now, you'd be looking at a total of 12, 14, 23 points. You want to throw one of these out over here, and this will now be scoring for another 2 points for this over here. So that would bring you to 23, 25 points total for everything you see over here. So you can see as you build these out across the course of the game, as you add more temples, as you add more pyramids, as you continuously build out the course of the game, you're going to be getting more and more point scoring mechanisms from these. If you heavily focus on a single color, you can get a lot of points, assuming no other player gets in the way and take those from you. But the balance is, in the course of across the course of the game, you generally have somewhere around the range of 16 to 20 actions, depending on the player count, depending on how the game goes. And while you do get bonus actions, there's only so many things you can actually build. Now, the good news is you do start with a temple of each color, with a pyramid of each color, so you will have the opportunity to put those out and give you a little bit of a leg up, but it's still hard to get where you need to go, and locking in and trying to get a full cascading 3-level pyramid over there, that is going to be brutally hard. And that is how you play Founders of Teotihuacan. Which brings us to the review part of things, starting off with ease of play. The rules themselves are not that hard to go through, although there are not necessarily the easiest absorbing of some of the aspects of the game. I find this is a much easier game to teach than it is to actually learn from the rulebook. Rules are not bad, to be clear, just some small aspects aren't immediately intuitive, and it helps to have the visual, examples as you're going through it to address any questions that comes up. So not that hard, medium rules, easier to teach. A game comes in at generally under an hour at the games we've played. I don't think we've had a single game go over an hour. Haven't timed them, just going by instinct over there. So it does fall into that shorter range while giving you a deeper experience. As far as player count, this is a 1 to 4 player game. I have not looked into the solo mode, or I haven't read the rules or gone into the solo mode at all. I know there's a die, but past that I don't really know. I played this at 2 and 3 players, enjoyed it at both. I think it works well at both those player counts. Higher player counts is going to give you a little bit more stuff in the market, but also take a little longer, so it's a balance as far as the interaction and how much you're getting out of that. But I played at both 2 and 3, liked it at both, don't have a strong preference one versus the other. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, there's a lot going on here, and this is ultimately, like I said already, a thinky filler. There's a lot of juggling of the resources, of the polyominoes, of the placements, of the different things you want, of the strength of your actions, of the bonuses you want, of taking an influence action, being mindful of taking an influence action with the right bonus action, but setting up the next player for a stronger action after that, of trying to double down on a bunch of pyramids and temples to score a ton of points, of being mindful of the fact that someone across the table from you is going for the same color as you, and that could be a little tricky. Going for these green temples over here can be a little easier because you don't have to pay as much extra resources in terms of the strength, but you also have to pay the extra resources because of the types of tiles they give you. These red pyramids give you much stronger tiles for just straight up points and extra stuff, so there's always a balance there. The temples building out your temples slowly but surely, you have to focus on that early because there's a limited number of temples and pyramids of the respective colors, or of the buildings for that matter, that come out each round. Again, that is going to depend on player count to a certain degree, at least over here, but these are just going to have the 2 and 2, and you're all competing over those. You can get extra ones from other tiles, but there's just so many different things you're trying to be mindful of, so many different things you're trying to juggle as you build out your board. You also want to be mindful of the fact that as you build out over these mask symbols, the faster and sooner you get things on top of those mask symbols, the more points you score, because these go down in points as you go down those chains. So trying to lock those points in early before someone else takes them, well, that's important. But the flip side of that is usually they don't really cross the lines quite as much. This one does, but for the most part, trying to lock these in is a little harder as far as getting the extra points you'll want from having your temples properly crossing boundaries. Temples that cross the boundaries will generally score more points if you have your pyramids set up accordingly. And so you're trying to manage all these different competing mechanisms. You're trying to manage all these different competing aspects, and gives you a lot of crunch, a lot of gameplay crunch in a very short playtime. And then the shuffling up of the action discs completely change how you want to approach every single turn. You might have been certain that you wanted to get a temple this turn, but if the action disc that gives you the extra influence, the extra build, is locked in somewhere else, that might change the way you approach it as you go through the game. And then the architect slowly moving around your board gives you another challenge to be mindful of. Because again, as you're trying to fill up these mask space, as you're trying to get everything in, you are limited by your architect. And so sometimes you'll take an influence action just to keep your architect moving because you don't particularly care about building there. But it might be an influence action that you overpaid a few more points for. There's a lot of different things to wonder about, and then getting that third level pyramid is a big part of it as well, because the third level pyramid, if you actually lock it in, can be incredibly impactful. But more often than not, if you actually get to the third level pyramid, that means you made many sacrifices along the way as far as building less of everything else. So sure, you have the highest multiplier in terms of the pyramids, but you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't both have all the maximum multipliers in your pyramid while having as many temples and resources as everything else you need. There are a lot of ways to choose how you pursue your goals here, as you manage this, as you mitigate that, as you prioritize one thing over the other. Or those rare times, and it is rare, at least for us, but it does happen, those rare times where you go ahead and put in an extra action, you give up a full action or take a higher strength action because it's the right move at the right time and it locks somebody else out of a spot. Those things can be impactful when you do them. As far as things I don't like, to begin with, it seems like locking in temple color is the most important thing you can do in this game. Meaning, I can't speak for, I don't know, other people playing the game, but for our group, for us playing the game, it seems like doubling down on a specific color of temple and pyramids and trying to maximize your multiplier there is the single most impactful thing that you can do. That does not take away from everything else I said. There's a lot of min-maxing in every other area. There's a lot of things to be mindful of in the other choices you make. But locking in, red temples and red pyramids and getting a maximum multiplier across multiple zones and building up to your second level, locking in a single color can be a hugely impactful way to score 70 points in a single color, which can be 2/3 of your score in the game, or, well, actually not necessarily, we actually have high scoring games. It can be a chunk of points from your score in this game, and so I think that is something that you can't not have in the game. If you want to be competitive in Founders of Teotihuacan, you have to choose a pyramid temple combo in a color and maximize and triple down on that as much as possible. Everything else will matter. The ways you pursue other things, the masks you optimize here, the buildings you play there, the other peripheral stuff you do, the other tiles you gather, everything else will matter, make no mistake. But I think that is the single biggest thing that is hugely impactful, and that might be a problem. If you want to have a little bit more freedom in the choices, I just don't think you do. Again, could be wrong. It's the downside of not playing with other people who might destroy me using a different strategy, but that's been our experience. And then lastly, I would say, or secondly in terms of what I don't like, is this game does have low variability. There's not a lot of ways in terms of the game changes game to game. You have your different boards, which give you a slightly different structure in the middle, but not really that different. It doesn't really change the way you pursue the game. It's not noticeably impactful in terms of the different options you have. You'll also have different tiles. The way that in order these come out, that will also be slightly changed up every single game, although for the most part, we find we go through most of these anyway, so you tend to see them all game to game. I would say this is a game that just doesn't seem to have a high degree of variability. The variability shifts slight adjustments in terms of the way you pursue each round, but it doesn't change the way you pursue the game. There's not overarching goals, there's no powers and abilities, there's nothing that really changes the game past trying to slightly react and adjust yourself to the other players in the game, and it does matter, because you're both pursuing the same pots. blocks, and you will have to adjust your strategy to others, but it's not hugely interactive. It's worker placement interactive in the sense that it's in the way you're trying to gather limited resources, but it just has a lower degree of variability, which means once we got several games in, we already felt we had started to shift towards the optimization of the game as opposed to the exploration and adventure of the game. As far as things I can see others not liking, first of all, people will take what you want. Going directly to what I just said a second ago, this is worker placement over the same shared pool of resources. If you're trying to go for that green pyramid strategy and the player to your left is also, while the player to your right is pursuing a blue pyramid strategy, well, you're going to be competing more heavily with another person, and that might just seem unfair. It might just seem that they're going to go ahead and get an edge in the game because you are competing with somebody else and they aren't. Or meanwhile, you're going for these buildings here and someone keeps taking the things you want. There are things, or the tiles that come out may or may not work with your strategy as much. So there is a degree of luck and or interaction that might punish you for the strategy you're pursuing, and you can feel a little bit victim to the way the game plays out. Secondly, and minor but also not minor, moving the architect is ridiculously easy to forget. This has been a problem for us in every game we play, where we start having to go back 5 turns and be like, here. 2 turns ago, I didn't move the architect. I couldn't have done what I did last turn. That's happened to us in nearly every single game we play. Just, I don't have a good answer or idea, but the idea of just moving the architect every turn, which should be ridiculously simple and easy, just for us hasn't been. It's been fine, and we do it, and we get it for the most part, but it's something that's easy to forget, and it's something that I almost wish there was a different, central system as opposed to each player having to do their own thing. It works. It's not the biggest deal. It's a minor pet peeve, but it's something worth noting. As far as final thoughts on Founders of Teotihuacan, there's a decent amount of strategy and choice in a very short game. These are all the things I liked already. There's a lot of choices, a lot of agency, there's a lot of decision points around what you're trying to do, how you're trying to min-max your score. And I know min-max is one of those words some people love, some people don't like. I tend to like it. I tend to like that aspect of trying to figure out how to get the crunchiest temple building in the game. I like the idea of building out your central pyramid, of pursuing those strategies. I've enjoyed trying different pathways as far as going heavily for the red temples over here, where you have to pay more for those temples, but you also get different scoring tiles, versus going heavily on resource conversions and just scoring tons of points, converting, 50, 60 points worth of resources by just going very heavy on the buildings, very heavy on the green temples. There's a lot of different small adjustments you can make for the way you pursue different strategies, for the ways you try to get those extra points in the game. Like I said already, I think you do have to very much heavily go for a single temple pyramid focus, but past that, there's a lot of other adjustments you can go. Locking in those extra bonus actions is fun. When you only have 18 actions in a game, getting in, 4, 5, 6 bonus actions from the combination of these tiles, from the combination of the various bonuses, gives you a lot of extra stuff. And placing down your pyramids to get extra stuff, there's just fun to get all these extra slight change, to feel like your 18 actions turned into 28 by the end of the game feels like you got a lot done. It feels like you did a lot. My biggest critique is something that those who watch my content a lot will probably already have seen coming, which is the low variability. I like this game, I've enjoyed this game, but by the time I got 4 or 5 games in, I was already starting to feel like I was repeating the same system, and I wasn't exploring the game anymore, and that's the biggest concern I have, at least of the way I look at games. I like it, I enjoy it, but it's also the same game every single time. This one's a 3.5 out of 5 for me. I enjoy it, I think there's a lot here, I can easily recommend it, with the caveat that I think that there is not a lot of things changing up the experience, and it's a puzzle that might get a little boring or repetitive as you continue to play through it. As far as other game recommendations, Baron Park's actually going to be a very similar feeling, but also much lighter experience. A lot of elements of this game did to me feel like Baron Park, a game which you're going to be building out your own bear zoos with polyominoes, with minor optimizations. Baron Park, I think, is a more accessible experience, a little less thinky, a little less forced in the decision points you have to make. But that could be a good thing or a bad thing depending on what you're looking for. And then if you want another game that's going to give you a lot of decision points in a very short time frame, Glass Road from Capstone Games, I believe, now has it. Glass Road from Larry Rosenberg and Capstone Games is going to be another game that comes in almost always under an hour while giving you a giant punch of experience as you build out your board, as you find different pathways, although giving you a lot more variability just by the very nature of the different buildings that are coming out every single game and the fact that you won't see those buildings every single game. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this review helpful, and as always, have a good one.